Hello everyone and welcome back to Russell's Movie Reviews, the show where I review so that's mostly pretty good and maybe one of the best movies of all time, or a film that absolutely sucked and should remain in the depths of hell. Now, last time we obviously discussed the absolute train wreck that was The Next Karate Kid, released in 1994. And after that movie, the Karate Kid franchise kinda took a massive hiatus for a while. And if you saw the last review, you'll perfectly understand why. But in around the late 2000s, there was a little craze that was going on called the remake craze, where basically any popular franchise that was released back in like the 80s and 90s sort of stuff, they were getting remakes up the fucking wazoo. Friday the 13th, that got a remake. Nightmare on Elm Street, that got a remake. And of course, The Karate Kid got a remake, which was released on June 11th of 2010. Now, the offset with this film, for me at least, is just, like, on the onset, I hear Karate Kid remake, and I just hear boring, lame, or flat out bad. Which are obviously not good signs for a movie. And so, yeah. So I did not have any good expectations for this movie. But I gave in. I mean, obviously I had to because, this was the last film in the Karate Kid franchise that we had to do. So it would be kind of stupid not to talk about the remake. So I watched it. And it wasn't that bad. It's not as good as, the first two, but it's certainly way better than part 2, part 3, and the next Karate Kid. But in order to really explain why, we have to go over details. So this was made with a budget of $40 million. Domestically, it made over $176 million. And worldwide, it made over $350 million. So this is domestically the most successful film in the whole Karate Kid franchise. Which makes sense because it is a remake. And honestly, most remakes, no matter what the quality is of them, they're going to do big fucking numbers and money. Like pretty much all remakes that I can think of at the top of my head at least made over like 100 mil at least. Well, I actually shouldn't say that. They basically most remakes that I can think of right now, no matter what quality the films actually were, they were successful. So maybe this film might have some interesting qualities that are different between this film and the original. And there are, which I'll get to some of them as the review goes on. But if you guys want a full out detailed explanations for all the major differences between the two films, I recommend going and watching the Nostalgia Critics video of the old versus new of the Karate Kid films, because that goes into way more depth than I'm going to go into in this review. So, watch that after you watch this to get a little bit more context about the major differences. This was directed by a guy named Howard Swart, ZWR, God damn it, Zwart, anyway. Kind of like Christopher Kane in the last film, that I never really heard of his work, so like the last film, I'm like, okay, this is not a good not a good, initial starting point at all. It's a director that I've never heard of before, and he's directing a Karate Kid film, which usually means it's not going to be that good. But we'll get to that later. So, for the summary, when his mother's career results in a move to China, 12-year-old Dre Parker, played by, in this film, Jaden Smith, finds that he is a stranger in a strange world. Though he knows a little karate, his fighting skills are no match for Chang, played by Zhenhui Wang. I'm going to say this right now. I'm so sorry if I butcher any of these names. I'm not that good in Chinese, so let's stress that right now. Um, who is the school bully. Dre finds a friend in Mr. Han, played by the wonderful Jackie Chan, a maintenance man who is also a martial arts master. Mr. Han, or Mr. Han, actually, now I'm thinking about it, Mr. Han teaches Dre all about Kung Fu in the hope that Dre will be able to face down Chang and perhaps win the heart of a pretty classmate named Mi Yang, played by Win Win Han. I think that's how you pronounce it. So yeah, basically along the same lines as the original, which I guess kind of makes sense considering the fact that this is a remake. So let's go over the major differences real quick before we start getting into the cast and other stuff. So first off, there's a very big age difference between the main protagonists in both of these films. Daniel in the original, I think he's about, I want to say 18 to 19, I want to say. So, mid, high schooler, I would say. Dre, on the other hand, he's only 12, as I already mentioned in the plot synopsis. So, yeah, it might make it a little bit more, how should I say it, a little bit more easier to kind of see, what Dre is going through, because, he's a younger kid, so he's not going to be, super thrilled with all these, new changes in his life. And I think, honestly, the biggest difference between the two main characters is really, what brings them, where they go to. So, in the original, I think they go from, I want to say, they go from New Jersey to, I think, L.A., I think. Don't quote me on that. So, yeah, it's basically just across the country. Sure. People are not going to, be, too thrilled with that at the beginning. But over time, they're going to get used to it. Dre, on the other hand, he goes from basically, from the looks of it, I'm going to say Philadelphia. Although I could be completely wrong about that. So, basically, I'm just going to say for the sake of this review, I'm going to say Philadelphia. Because that's what it just looks like, and it's just, let's just say a specific, an area, a continent. So, or whatever. So, he goes from Philadelphia to China. That's across the fucking world. So you can I can see why more people sympathize with Dre just on that basis alone. Yeah, Daniel had to move a fairly long distance too, but it was only across the country. Dre had to move from one side of the world to the other. And then almost basically instantly get used to it. And you live in a shithole apartment. Yeah, Daniel had that in the first film as well, but it's grandly, it could just be in the area that they go in. That could simply be the fact. That could also be said for this film, but at the same time, it's moving from the United States to China. More accurately, Beijing. But still, you move from one side of the country to the other. You go to a shithole apartment in this new world, and you're supposed to just adapt to it. I can see why more people sympathize with Dre on that front alone, because it's to a 12-year-old kid, that could fuck up his brain. Although, where I side more with Daniel is in terms of the fighting aspect. Because, yeah, Dre does fight, Chang, several times throughout the film. Or no, he basically gets beat up by Chang and his classmates, or gang members, pretty much. Or karate friends, whatever. Yeah, and it's but here's the thing. When you're a kid, it's it's kind of expected that you may not fight back because you may not, know all this sort of stuff. When you're in high school, you pretty much have to fight. Like, if you get put into a fight, there's no backing down. You basically have to fight, or else you'd be basically called a pussy. So, on that sense, I root more for Daniel because it's like, yeah, with Dre, you don't want to see him get beat up because he's a kid. But at the same time, I think it just hurts more when you see Daniel get beat up because it's like he doesn't have a fucking choice. Like, he has to fight or else, they're probably going to do even more damage to him. So it's like both characters have different aspects of their character that makes you want to root for them slightly more. But honestly, to me, I think I'm rooting for Daniel more because it's like it's the character that we grow up, more with as, we spend more time with him. Dre, we only get one film with him, whereas Daniel, we get 3 films over a span of, let's see, from 84 to 89. So a 5-year gap. And then we jump to him in, when he's an adult and spend, I want to say 2 to 3 years, like another 2 or 3 years with him. So, over the span of 5 seasons of a show. So, yeah, you kind of, I just kind of root more for him than I do Dre. Even though Dre, I do root for. I'm not saying that I don't. I just think that if I had to compare the two and I had to root for one, I would have to root for Daniel more. Although, grandly, for Dre, I would honestly I could see why people root for him more because, like the nostalgia critic says in his video, he makes the point that it's like, yeah, when it's like in high school, it's like, yeah, you got to fight, but it's like in this film, yeah, it's like, Mom, there's a fucking psychotical, psychotic Chinese kid that's beating the shit out of me. Do something. And it's like, so it's like, whatever. And then there's only one more that I could really think about right now, but I'm gonna save that until my favorite scene in the movie because that's actually where it's brought up. So I'm gonna wait on that one. But let's go over the characters. So obviously we have Dre Parker, who is the main character, played by Jaden Smith. Now, when I saw that Jaden Smith was attached to this movie, I'm like, oh fuck. This is not gonna be a good, Jackie Chan might be good in it, and the cinematography might be great, but it's like Jaden Smith might just ruin the whole fucking movie with terrible acting. Because not to criticize Jaden Smith that much, but he's known for a lot of shit acting. Look at After Earth, for example. He's fucking terrible in that. But I watched it, and he's believable as this 12-year-old who is really not gelving well with, this new society that, he's brought up in. And it's just like, it's really believable that he does not like it here and he wants to go back. But he's like forced to stay here. And I can really buy that for him. So, even though I still prefer Ralph Macchio over Jaden Smith, I can still sympathize with the kid. Then we have the fantastic Jackie Chan as Mr. Han, who is basically the Miyagi of this universe. And I don't know, really, if I could... I mean, honestly, like, if I had to compare Mr. Han to Mr. Miyagi and say, like, someone told me which one do you think it's better, I would have, honestly, a really hard choice just going by the first film. But if we included everything with Mr. Miyagi in, including the next Karate Kid, I would have to go for Miyagi because same thing with Dre. You only get one film with Mr. Han, and then he's abandoned because they never made any sequels to this. So, yeah. But that does not mean that Jackie Chan does not pull off a great performance in it, and he does. I think it's probably his best acting in the entire movie. Then we have Zen Wee Wang as Cheng. He's all right. Granted, that comes down to the fact that he just basically just speaks Chinese like 90% of the time. Even though the version I watched did have basically subtitles uh, for all the Chinese in it, it's still like if I want to watch a movie, I want to watch a movie. I don't want to read like I'm reading a fucking book. Um, that being said, this kid does pull off a very good performance in terms of being fucking psychotic as hell. Like, goddamn. And yeah, he does pull off the whole being the antagonist for the kid. For our main character in this film. I just think that Johnny in the first one was just way better, in my personal opinion. We have a Win Han as uh Mi Yang or Mi Ying. I saw two different like I looked it up on this. The synopsis said Mi Yang, but then I looked up the cast list and it said Mi Ying. So I don't know which way it's supposed to be pronounced. But I'm just gonna say uh the love interest for Jay, or for Dre. Sorry, not Jay. Um, she's fine. It's stereotypical love interests that or kid love interest that you get from like some modern movies nowadays, but she does fine. We have Taraji P Henson. I again so sorry if I'm pronouncing butchering any of these names. She plays Sherry Parker, who is basically the mother to Dre. She's fine. If I had to compare it to the mother, I don't really know. If I had to compare it to the mother from the original, I don't know really. I think I would just go. I would just say a tie for that one. We have Luke Careberry as Harry, who is basically the neighbor to Dre, and they become friends afterwards. And he pops up like in and out of the film. He pops up like a couple scenes at the beginning, and then one scene in like the middle, and then he turns up at the tournament. And then finally we have Yu Rong Young. Again, so sorry if I butchered that name. As Master Lee, who is basically just the teacher in the karate dojo with Chang, who teaches Chang, I should say. He's all right. I honestly thought that they were gonna do more with his character because it is established that he knows and has known Mr. Han for a long time at this point because they established that they both know each other. So it's like establish more on this. Like talk more about this, but no. It's just like brought up in like one or two lines and like near like the end of the first act, and it's just forgotten about later on. And I'm just like, really? So yeah. Now to move on to favorite scenes, I have to get a little bit of how should I say it? A little bit of backstory to or the build up to what the scene is. So when after Mr. Han and Dre go to the school or to the dojo and say don't bother and Mr. Han tells them like don't bother with like don't mess with the kid or else until the tournament and then we'll settle it there. And they're like, all right. So they leave and then they start training and you see over the course of the montage and like the scenes that he's training, you see Mr. Han working on this car that he has in his like in the garage, like the main area of this I guess it's like his house. So they're training and then like Dre's getting like really good at it. Like he's like slowly getting better and better. And then one day he shows up at the house and he hears like smashing glass going everywhere. So he walks in and Mr. Han is smashing his smashing the car that he's working on with, I think it's a sledgehammer. And then Dre looks over and he sees like a bottle of like whiskey, like Chinese whiskey, and then like a shot glass. So he's like, oh, it's established that he's just drunk. And then Dre's like, what are you doing? And then like he stops and he basically like stumbles his way into the car, and then Dre sets his stuff down and gets in. And this is basically like the backstory scene for Mr. Han, kind of like it was for Mr. Miyagi in the original. Now here's this is where I'm talking about, but the final real main difference that I can remember between the two films. Now, if you guys remember in the first film, I said that Mr. Miyagi, his wife was pregnant with their child, but there was a miscarriage, and the wife and the baby both passed away shortly after the baby came out of the came out of the womb. So, yeah, that's dark. Like that's sad. But then it's like Mr. Han is like almost 10 times sadder, and I'll explain why. So he gets in the car and he goes, today is June 8th. And then he goes on to explain that he had a kid that, loved, like, I think he said he loved gardening, and he loved, like studying with his dad, like martial arts. And his wife was a singer, and he goes on, like, even as, like, not professionally, she just sung for me. And then he goes on to explain that they were driving home from somewhere, and him and his wife were arguing about something, and he got so angry that he spun the car out of control and crashed it, killing his wife and son, and he survived. And ever since then, he builds up the car, he fixes it up, and then smashes it on the 8th, and then does the same cycle ever since then. And it's like, fuck, man. Like, this is just fucking depressing. And then, unlike the first film where, like, Mr. Miyagi kind of, like, forgets about what he says, because he's like pissed drunk when Mr. Han is also drunk, but Miyagi's like pissed drunk, like he's like almost blacked out drunk, and he goes on and he tells his backstory, then he falls asleep, and then the next day he just goes on like nothing happened. Whereas this film, he explains his backstory, and then he just breaks down on the steering wheel, like just completely just bawling his eyes out, and it cuts over to Dre, and you even see like him starting to like tear up a bit. He gets out of the car, he goes into the driver's side, and then you see like these little stick things, which they were trained with a few scenes before, where it's like Mr. Han holds one side, and then Dre has like because basically it's like these sticks with like the ropes around it, so you tie the rope around one person's hands, and then the other person like holds it, and you basically have to match the movements. So he grabs those sticks and like kind of hooks it around his arms and like drags him out, and is basically, he doesn't say anything pretty much. He's just like, come on, I know you can fight through this. Like, I'm gonna fight through this tournament. Let's do this. And then that's kind of like him getting like Mr. Han getting his confidence back, and he's like, let's do this. And then that basically goes into the final training montage before the last like 20 to 30 minutes is on the tournament. And yeah, the whole scene is just my favorite. It's just basically, yeah, it's kind of like the same thing that I said for the first one, like for the original, but it works so well with this film. Now, before we get on to the rest, like the final few things about this film, I want to talk about the runtime for all of these films, because that's going to play into a point about this film, and it's a little bit of a nitpick, but it's still worthy. So, as well pull these ones out to get more concrete evidence or information. So, The Karate Kid from '84 has a runtime. What do you even say? It's gonna be so stupid if I spend so much time trying to find what the runtime of this is. Damn, does it actually not say it on here? It's probably gonna say it on here. Okay, so 127 minutes for the original. So, not bad. Just over, I think, over 2 hours. Yeah. Then, The Karate Kid Part 2, 113 minutes. So, slightly shorter, but still easier to watch. Karate Kid 3 is 112 minutes. Yep. So, again, slightly shorter than the second one, but I guess that kind of makes sense for how much of a shitty film it is. The next Karate Kid, 107 minutes, so I think that's the shortest out of all of them so far. Which makes sense, because this film was, if this was at least, 140 minutes, I would kill myself. The next Karate Kid, 140 minutes. If you guys don't know what that means this movie is 2 hours and 20 minutes long. So yeah, that's kind of this is the lengthy boy. That's really only one of my only major complaints about this movie is just it's way too fucking long. You could have trimmed this movie by at least 30 minutes and this would have been fine. But goddamn, 2 hours and 20 minutes? Goddamn. So, yeah. Anyway. But honestly, the other nitpicks I have is just certain scenes where it's just they drag it out a little too long. And the romance plot is a bit corny, I honestly have to say. But that's just me. Anyway, so I have, obviously a couple fun facts, and I actually didn't know any of these until I started doing research. So it was that's interesting. So, did you know that Ralph Macchio was offered a role, a little cameo role in this film? Who obviously, Ralph Macchio obviously played Daniel LaRusso in the first three, and would go on to star in Cobra Kai. And he declined the offer to make a cameo in this film. And I think that would honestly be... That was for the better, because honestly, if that actually did happen, I would probably just be sitting there wait, why, what is Daniel doing here? that would just make me confused. And is this a remake, or is this a different Karate Kid in the same universe? And whatever. And then the second fun fact is actually kind of funny. Is that Jackie Chan was the one to come up with that came up with the Jackie routine in the film. So if you don't know what that means, if you haven't seen it, it's basically where you kind of you put the coat, you put your jacket on a hanger, and then you take it off and you kind of go like this, and then you keep on doing that, and then basically it's kind of the wax on wax off thing from the first one, where it's it may not seem like it's kung fu, but then once you actually start doing it, it's holy shit, it's actually kung fu. And then the score for this film is surprisingly composed by James Horner, who did a lot of 80s scores, including, Krull, Aliens, and of course, Star Trek 2 and 3. So I was like, oh, okay, so maybe this will have, a really kind of, good score. Honestly, if I had to be honest, it's not that good. It just seemed like one of those generic scores I hear from Michael Gucciolato, who did, a number of scores, throughout the 2010s, and they all sound almost exactly the same, in my opinion. So, yeah. So, that's pretty much about it. So, final thoughts on the Karate Kid remake from 2010. It's a good movie. Is it as good as the original? No. Is it as good as, The Karate Kid Part 2? Not really. Is it as good as Karate Kid 3? Yeah, it's fucking better than Karate Kid 3. And it's obviously way better than the next Karate Kid. But if I was, forced to watch this movie and I had nothing else to do, I'll be like, sure, why not? So, but there are some scenes in this movie that really do drag it down for me, which is why I'm going to give this film a solid B. It's a good, adaptation of it's a good remake, but at the same time, it's a remake, so it honestly 99% of remakes aren't really perfect because it's like you're just remaking an already great movie, and it's like you kind of just declined a point from that. There are some very good remakes and almost pitch perfect remakes. I mean, I can already think of one, and that's actually, you know what? I'm gonna go and grab it. And it's like, if you want to see a remake done right and done perfectly, you look at John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982. But that being said, The Karate Kid from 2010 is still a very fine remake and a very fine film overall. I just think that compared to the original, it's not as good. But it is a solid film overall. So, that was my review of the Karate Kid remake from 2010, and that concludes the Karate Kid marathon. I hope you guys enjoyed these sets of reviews, and it seems like you have, because the views for these reviews are been doing very good compared to usually. Even the next Karate Kid has gone over 70 views at this point at the time of this recording, which is the 30th of August of 2022. That review has already had over 70 views, which for a movie review, for me, like within the first few days, is incredible. And I want to thank all of you guys for liking and, watching those movies or those videos over and over again. I really do appreciate it. So, yeah, that concludes it for the Karate Kid marathon. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you guys want to, stay tuned for the next video, which will be my Redux review on Independence Day. So, yeah, I haven't talked about this film in almost 2 years. And honestly, most of those early reviews I really want to redo. And this is one of them. So, I thought giving this film a second shot. Let's see if my opinions have changed since that review. So yeah, stay tuned for this Friday where I'm going to be doing my Redux review on Independence Day. As always, you can click down on my username down there to go to my channel, or click at my profile picture right here to go and check out my channel. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that bell icon to get notified when future videos are coming out. We are so close to 130 subscribers. I want to really try and hit that before the end of the year. So let's try and get that goal before the end of the year. So, and it's not that hard to do. I don't think, at least. It's 3 subscribers. So, let's try and hit 130 by the end of the year. Let's try and do that. Also, follow me on my social medias, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I usually keep posting on there when new videos are coming out. Like this film, for example. And, yeah, also follow me on Twitch, because I'm going to be doing some Twitch live streams every once in a while. And, yeah, I think that's pretty much about it. Oh, yeah, also check out the latest 2 reviews right here, I think. I'm not sure. But, yeah, anyway, guys, stay tuned for this Friday for the Independence Day Redux review. Live long and prosper. Out.